After broadcast. All right. I'm getting some wind somewhere, but we should be good. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Q&A for the diversity delegates. We have Caitlin Petersen and Matt Mecoli. Correct? Mecoli. So Matt Mecoli and Caitlin Petersen. So there are two candidates, and I'm going to be asking them a couple of questions, and they're going to have 2 minutes to answer them. So we're going to go start with the first question, and we're going to alternate between the two. So Caitlin will go first on the first question, and Matt will go first on the second question. Okay. The first question I want to ask is, in a way of an opening statement, what in your background makes you qualified for this position? So Caitlin, can you go first?
Okay, thank you, Sam. So what makes me qualified in this position is, of course, looking at me, you can see that I am what is known as a double minority. So I'm a racial minority, and then I'm a female, so I'm a gender minority. And I have lived that way my entire life, of course. And then having lived my life this way, I have always made sure to help others that are like me and others who are not like me, anybody who I feel is maybe at a disadvantage for the way that society looks at them. I have always tried to help throughout my lifetime. So in undergrad, I was an English major and anthropology minor, but actually, because I went to UNC Chapel Hill and it's a big research school, I did a lot of research in diversity. I wrote a grant actually for encouraging Native American children in their culture and how programs can better be implemented with grant money to help foster encouragement and pride and diversity cultures, and to allow also the majority culture to embrace that culture, as well as just volunteering, mentoring to other students who were minorities out of state. UNC was a minority, so I mentored for those students. At my current school, I'm a rising 2L at Washington Lee School of Law. I work with BOLSA. I have been elected the vice president of BOLSA, and I am the new coordinator of BOLSA now because this year I went to the regional and national BOLSA competitions and placed there, actually making school history because I'm the youngest at 21 and the first 1L in my school's history to rank so far in a competition. So I always try to excel because I know that I am seen as kind of the face of my minority, and I want to help other minorities who are law students excel as well.
All right, thank you, Caitlin. Matt, could you answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. So I agree with Caitlin. I think being a part of a minority community is extremely important. If you're going to do this sort of work, I'm a gay man. I'm a member of the LGBT community. But I would say the most important thing is experience in the field. And I would say both experience doing diversity work and experience working within the ABA itself. So I've done quite a bit. I sat as the Third Circuit Governor on the Law Student Division Board of Governors for a year, and I spent the last year as a liaison to the Commission on Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity, which is one of the Goal 3 entities. And now I'm the chair in the section on Civil Rights and Civil Justice of the SOGI committee there, the Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity committee there. And I would say probably if I was going to highlight one thing that I've done that qualifies me for this position as an opening statement would be my work with Resolution 109 last year, which was the resolution that moved the non-discrimination and anti-harassment policies into the black letter law of the ABA's Model Rules of Professional Conduct. As a member of the Law Student Division Board of Governors, I spoke at a hearing on behalf of the division on that. I worked with the Law Student Division to get their endorsement of their delegates for that, and that ended up passing through the ABA House of Delegates. So I would say I've worked both with the ABA and doing diversity work for several years now. So that would probably be my primary qualification in my eyes.
All right, thank you to you both. So both of you mentioned definitions, or both of you mentioned diversity. So the one thing I'm going to be asking you, and starting with Matt, is what is the definition of diversity? And how do you see it being, and how do you show yourself having a commitment to diversity? So we'll start with you, Matt.
Diversity to me is very broad. I think it'd be hard to put an exact definition on it. I would say the best way to be open to diversity, though, is to be open. I think diversity comes in a great many ways, shapes, and forms. You know, we've talked about 3 different kinds of diversity just sitting here right now. We've talked about gender and sex. We've talked about orientation. We've talked about race. I think one of the things that came up when I was working for the Law Student Division was that we didn't feel like we had done enough to bridge the gap in terms of socioeconomic diversity. Because it's so expensive to go to the annual and the mid-year meetings, and one of the things we wanted to do was try and extend to law students who couldn't afford to go to those meetings more opportunities to get involved. So I would say the best thing you can do in order to encompass diversity and in order to address issues of diversity is to remain open. And remain open not just to the kinds of diversity that you think you know, but the many sort of diverse experiences that exist in the world that you haven't personally experienced, you may not even be aware of.
All right, thank you, Matt. Going to Caitlin.
Yeah, I totally agree with Matt. I think diversity is, even among different diverse groups, can be defined in many different ways. But how I tend to try to define diversity is what society sees as an outlier. So like Matt said, we've been talking about racial diversities, LGBTQA students, we've been talking about gender diversity, but I think also something that I want to focus on, especially if I was ABA diversity delegate, is like non-traditional students, people who are older who are in law school, and then like people who have families in law school, as well as students with disabilities, because I am also a student who has an unseen disability. I have health issues outside of my control, and that could lead me to be classified as a disabled law student as well. So just how I show that I'm committed to these areas is, again, just I do a lot of community service work. I have for years. In undergrad, I was very involved with community service outreach that helped the community as well as undergraduate students at my school, such as talking to the local youth about like their legal rights and making sure that they understood that even though they're like of a minority status, that they had the same legal rights as anyone else, encouraging confidence. At my law school, actually, while I'm a law school student, I actually run a charity organization called Binky Patrol, which directly relates to helping people who are disabled in communities. So I organize volunteers across the state of Virginia to make blankets and just different goods and donate them to LGBTQ houses and children's homes, women's shelters. I really like to help engage the community on these personal levels through my volunteer work, and that's how I show my dedication to all diversity.
All right, thank you. And so both of you kind of touched on diversity programming that you all have done. And so the next question I'm going to ask that Caitlin's going to go first on is, how have you been an advocate for diversity and inclusion at your law school or other organizations you were part of?
Yeah, so like I mentioned previously, I am a member of BALSA. So our BALSA unit, being at a school like WNL that has a small class size, we're a small BALSA unit, but still we have managed to reach out in our community to all minorities then, such as we're not just a Black organization. We like to say we reach out to all racial minorities and all like LGBTQTA minorities at our school. And because we're so inclusive of everybody at our school who might be seen as an outlier or different, we have won for 2 years the BALSA Small Chapter of the Year, specifically for our work in being diverse and including all the students that we can. I specifically, in participating in the moot court competition this year, was very much an advocate in talking. We talked about the death penalty this year, and so we were talking about how the death penalty affects minorities and just different diverse people, and how that impact can be cut down through different legislations in our own BALSA network. And again, like I said, through my work through Binky Patrol, often there are minorities that I deal with that I try to help with through my charity organization, Binky Patrol.
All right, thank you. Matt?
There we go, I'm unmuted. So I would re-highlight the work that I did with Model Rule 8.4. When I was a Third Circuit governor, I definitely used the position on the board to advocate for diversity issues, but in particular that diversity initiative. It was the first time we ever included non-discrimination language in the black letter law of our professional ethics standards. I spoke on behalf of the division. before a hearing of the Standing Committee on Ethics and Professional Responsibility. I also wrote the resolution, spoke on its behalf, and got it passed through the Law Student Division Assembly. And then in the past year, I would say the major thing that I focused on is something called the Student Shield Project, which is work that I'm doing with the Commission on Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity. And what we do is we create simple, straightforward, one-page documents that inform elementary and secondary students of their legal rights under federal and state law. The project focuses right now on LGBT students, but I actually reached out to the liaisons for the other Goal 3 entities, which include Hispanic Rights and Responsibilities, Disability, I think there's 5 of them, and we talked about the possibility of potentially trying to expand the project so that we could have law students and lawyers working to create strong, informative pieces that allowed students to help defend themselves against bullying and allowed teachers, administrators, parents, faculty, advocates, lawmakers, whoever, know the exact nature of the rights that students have to help protect them from bullying. Because I agree with what Caitlin said earlier, that a great way of defining a diversity is who society sees as an outlier. And I think one of the ways that that can manifest itself often is in increased risk for things like bullying. So I would say those are the 2 major things I've done over the course of the last 2 years.
All right, thank you. So one of the big things that happens is when you're interacting with a lot of different people, there are people who come from different backgrounds than yours. So when you're interacting with a person from a different background than your own, how do you ensure that communication is effective, or how can you figure out a way to advocate them? So Matt, you'll go first on this one.
So I think I see 2 distinct parts of that question. How do you remain open? Really, again, I'm going to return to openness. I think it requires you to attempt to put yourself in the shoes of the other individual, especially the more different your backgrounds, the more difficult that can be. But I don't think you can advocate for someone until you've at least tried to have that kind of empathy with what their experience might be. Because you may end up advocating for things that they don't really need, or they don't really want, or that really don't represent that community all that well. So a lot of my advocacy work has been done with the LGBT community, specifically because that's an experience that I understand. And that's one of the reasons that when I was working on the Student Shield Project, as I've been working on the Student Shield Project, to create these anti-bullying resources, that I wanted to reach out to the other liaisons from the other Goal 3 entities, because I don't understand all diverse experiences equally. And I think one of the things that you really have to do is not just have a dialogue with someone, but invite them to be an ongoing part of the conversation. Because you can translate some of it, but you can't translate all of it. So one of the things that I actually would love to do if I get the position of Delegate of Diversity and Inclusion is create a sort of ad hoc committee that includes the Goal 3 liaisons, because I think there needs to be a lot more dialogue between those individuals in order to make sure that we're creating programming that's good across, I think maybe we could consider it the diversity spectrum, and really taking into account intersectionality and other issues of that sort.
All right, thank you. Caitlin?
Yeah, sorry, I unmuted. But yeah, I agree with a lot of what Matt said, but just tailor it a little bit to my experiences. So I am a military brat. That means my father was in the military. I was born into that lifestyle. And so I have lived all over the country. I've lived across the world and traveled across the world. I've always had to learn and know and still continue to grow in learning how to deal with people who come from many different backgrounds from mine. I have a very diverse friend group, in fact, that I have been talking to all throughout my candidacy about, hey, if I was to represent you, what would you want for me to do for you? Or what do you think that students that look like you would want from the ABA? So I make a point always in talking to students who I think that the ABA can help and what they would want to do. And that's why if I was the ABA Delegate Diversity and inclusion delegate, I would really want to, this new caucus that I understand has been added this year, I really want to empower those caucuses, because I understand that those are law students directly speaking. And so we could use that type of directly speaking to us to understand what those diverse groups want, and then putting that into ABA resolutions and advocacy. So those are my plans, and that's how I tend to communicate and grow in dealing with people who are from different backgrounds of mine.
All right. Thank you to you both. So the last question I want to ask on this kind of topic is, sometimes when you kind of mention empathy, that you know a lot of people and you've been able to be more open, sometimes some of them just don't understand. So what happens, or how have you handled situations where a colleague was not accepting of another's diversity? And so, Caitlin, we will go with you first, and then we'll go to Matt.
Yes, I've run into those examples recently, actually. So at my job, actually, I am interning with the Commonwealth's attorneys of my district. There was a little girl there who was talking about how she knew this girl in her class who she thought was weird because she was quiet and she had depression and she had tried to commit suicide, and she didn't understand that. And she just thought the girl was weird and thought that she didn't want to hang out with her. And I haven't been brought in as kind of the role model, the model student to talk to about that. I explained to her that even if people are different from you sometimes and you can agree with them, there's always a common ground that you can find. And I actually sat there and talked to her, and she found that the common ground that they both had was that sometimes she wants to be quiet too and not have to talk as much. She feels like she's pressured to talk. So I feel that the ways that we get people to bridge the gap between maybe their diverse lives, if they have that type of friction, is to just get them to see the common ground in those situations. Everybody has some type of common ground, no matter who they are, and even if it's small things, those things can build to at least get people to understand the humanity that exists between all of us.
All right, thank you, Caitlin. Matt?
Absolutely. Well, this is a very timely and a sort of very divisive argument that goes on, I think, in people that work within the diverse communities. And I always am an advocate of calling in. So I'm actually going to share a personal story. I was working for a political advocacy group when I was at an undergrad at the University of Alabama. And the boss that I was working for, we were talking one night after doing work, and it was just sort of everyone sitting around a table doing water cooler talk. And he just started going on this rant about how gays are the cause of the moral decline of America, and on and on and on and on. And I was sort of a little taken aback because I had been working with this person for months. I realized that a second that he didn't know, which surprised me a little bit. But he just sort of went on this rant, and I sort of went home, and I was a little bit shaken. But I went in the next day, and I went and talked to him, and I basically said, I'd like the ability to do my job. I'm good at it. If you don't want me to do this, if this is a problem for you, I'll resign, and I'll give you the name of somebody else. And he ended up not having me resign. He apologized, and we, over the course of the next 6, 8, 10 months, I think he became someone who was more open to a different diverse culture. But I think it's very important that we do that sort of calling in of people. And by calling in, I definitely mean that when there are these people, when you encounter someone who really has some bigotry or really has some walls up against another diverse group, I think the most important thing you can do is take a step back, because you're going to need it, and find a way to break through that barrier. I remember later on he started asking me a lot of questions. Some of them were very personal and very invasive and uncomfortable, but I recognized at a certain point that he had really just never spoken to someone who, as far as he knew, was openly gay. And I think those are the kind of moments when you sort of nudge people a little bit one way or the other. I think that's, in my experience, been the best way to do that.
All right, thank you, Matt. So we're going to go on with talking more about the ABA and the delegate position. So kind of continuing on the fact that you both have brought in your experiences in this, what is your vision of an association like the ABA that fully embraces diversity? And Matt, we'll go with you.
Sorry, I had to unmute there.
Oh.
A vision of the ABA that fully, takes quite a bit of imagination there. I would say we've made a couple really good steps. I think that the Goal 3 entities are probably the greatest chance for the ABA to expand its influence and its work in diversity and inclusion. And they're going through a restructuring right now. I think the Board of Governors has just sort of put forward that that's going to be happening. And I think probably the best thing that we could do in the Law Student Division, again, is make more of an effort to make sure that our liaisons, particularly the liaisons and the individuals that work with entities that do work in diversity and inclusion, are speaking to one another. Because I know the first 8 months of my term as a liaison to a Goal 3 entity, I don't think I spoke with any of them, and I think that's a shame. And it's something where there's resources that are being duplicated, there's projects that are being duplicated, there's people who want to do diversity work, and then there's other people who need people to do diversity work, and they're never speaking to each other. So what would a more diverse and inclusive ABA look like? I think that's a very specific number of policies and changes that would have to go into place, but I think the best way to get there and the best way that we can continue to address new problems as they arise is definitely to get people talking to one another. It's definitely to have some sort of structure in place so that these individuals that do this work can share resources, can talk, can coordinate with one another.
All right, thank you, Matt. And then we'll move on to Caitlin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I definitely agree with Matt, but just going to tailor it a bit of just, yeah, I've already thought about this and said that if I do win this position, I want to reach out like immediately to those liaisons, to those student representatives, and also just really reach out to the caucuses, because like I've said, I understand that this is students directly speaking to the ABA, and just making sure that they are empowered, so that way how we can change what we want to change about the ABA and make it more diverse is listen to the diverse students directly talking to the ABA about what they want. And also what I was going to say is another anecdote, and this is not to embarrass or put anybody's business, but you notice that for all the candidates that have been selected who are minorities, that they are part of some type of minority group at their school, such as BOSA or the Latino school organizations. And the reason why those organizations, in my experience with them, although it's short, but just the reason why those organizations work so well in fostering diversity is because they reach out well with outreach. They send regular emails and regular outreach to those members. They have regular smaller, medium, and larger events that students can participate in based on their income, based on their level of interest. And I really think the ABA can learn from these organizations by incorporating smaller networking events or just like seminars on how to network, and then like larger networking events or just like medium in your region networking events, for example, and how to get more diversity in law students going up to higher level jobs and those types of things. So just my plan for this position is just I want people to talk, and I want to hear it directly from the law students of what they want, so that way the ABA can incorporate it the best way.
All right, thank you on that. And that kind of actually flows well with my next question. So I'm going to give you a little bit more time to kind of talk about the tangible ideas and achievable goals you'll bring to the council. So both of you had kind of mentioned, Caitlin, you mentioned caucuses, Matt, you mentioned good communication. We're going to have this question to be expanding on that and seeing if there's other ideas that people should know about. So Caitlin, we'll go with you first.
So yeah, of course, I said caucuses, and actually I'm going to share another personal story that I encountered today. Sorry, I just got really good material from working today, and that I met with an African-American female judge in my district today. And what she was talking about with the group of students that I was escorting was, of course, she had mentioned, do you know how many female attorneys in this district are judges? And we didn't know, and she said there were only 2. And she said in the state of Virginia, where I go to law school, there are only 100 female lawyers in the entire state of Virginia, and she said that there was probably less than 50 minority judges inside the state of Virginia. So just that is abysmal, considering that, and the ABA did an article on this last year, that it does not represent the population of lawyers, it does not represent the population of this country to have that few people of minority status in power. So what I would like to do is actually have a showcase on the ABA website of just people who are minority and are successful, such as these judges, these lawyers at big law firms who are partners, and showcase more of that. I would like to have more blogs of minority students talking about their experiences across all spectrums. So a non-traditional student talking who has a wife and a child, maybe an older law student who's 60, and just incorporate more of these people talking directly to the ABA and to other students about their experiences so people can see that it's possible and that it's possible to thrive with the ABA's help.
All right, thank you, Caitlin. Matt? Matt, you're on mute.
All right.
Yourself.
Sorry about that. So I would reiterate real quickly, one of the things that I want to do immediately upon getting in again is create an ad hoc committee that includes Goal 3 entity liaisons and liaisons to any other groups like the Commission on Youth at Risk, which isn't technically a Goal 3 entity, but does a lot of work in the diversity field. I would want to immediately get those groups together and immediately begin discussions on the tangible things that each and every one of them needs. I'd like to expand the Student Shield project to include the other commissions, not just the SOGI Commission. And those are both things that I would do sort of immediately in terms of diversity. But I think that there are other things that we need to do, and I think this is sort of a two-part title. It's Delegate, Diversity, and Inclusion. So those are definitely things that involve diversity and inclusion. But I think there are other things that a delegate also needs to do. And I think some of those issues include law school accreditation standards, which the ABA has recently begun working on yet again. And I think it also includes things like the uniform bar exam. And those are public service loan forgiveness because, again, with at-risk communities, I think what we need to pay attention to is the areas where we can act, even in a non-diverse setting, to improve the ability of individuals to get into power, the individuals to pass into the profession. So public service loan forgiveness is a program that helps a lot of people who don't have a lot of money go and afford law school and then work in the public sector. We have to continue to expand the uniform bar exam. It's much easier for young lawyers coming right out of school to switch between jurisdictions if the uniform bar exam is in place. And that sort of flexibility, I think, goes a long way to helping individuals who, again, do not have a lot of money. And I think probably the third thing that I would look at in a non-directly diversity and inclusion sense, although I think indirectly it affects it, is definitely accreditation standards. Particularly with for-profit schools. I know I'm not really popular for saying this, but I think we need to continue to make sure that accreditation standards don't hurt any students. Diverse or not, no student needs to be hurt because accreditation standards are allowing schools to sort of prey on them.
All right. Thank you, Matt. So that kind of goes on the point that Kaylin had mentioned earlier of a showcase. And one thing as a diversity delegate is that you're going to represent law students of varying gender, national origin, racial and ethnic backgrounds, sexual orientation, gender identity, as well as non-traditional students like part-time students and parents and lawyers with disability. So the delegate's role on the Law Student Division Council is to bring these diverse viewpoints to the forefront. How would you go about bringing these diverse viewpoints? In particular, who do you see yourself representing? And Matt, we'll go with you first, and then we'll go Caitlin next. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to sound like a broken record. I think that's the kind of job that no one can do without having a lot of discussion with people outside of themselves. So again, I would definitely focus on getting together those liaisons. I need to hear from other people more to be able to better understand. So I think that would probably be the first thing that I would do to make sure that I was representing all law students. And again, if I'm going to talk about who do I think that I'm representing, I think that sitting on the Law Student Division Council is a position that requires you to represent all law students, period. I think being the delegate of diversity and inclusion requires you to make sure that no one's voice is getting lost on that council. And again, I think the best way to do that is to go and talk to the actual individuals themselves who need to have their voices heard. I don't think it's me giving my opinion. I can give my opinion all day long. I went to law school. We're all pretty opinionated. But I think the most important thing that we can do is actually go out and talk to the individuals. And I think entity liaisons are great because they're individuals who really wanted to get involved, and they sit with their greater ABA counterparts. They know what's going on in other parts of the ABA. But yeah, I think I represent all law students. I just think my job is to make sure that on the council, voices don't get lost, particularly voices of individuals who are easy to get lost in the mix.
All right, thank you, Matt. Caitlin?
Yeah, so I mean, visually, I'm going to split this into two parts because just visually, I represent, of course, Black students and female students. I have, from my experiences in the past, I don't really even represent to most Native American law students, a Native American law student, because I am of mixed heritage and do not look like probably the stereotype of what people think Native Americans look like. But of course, I agree with Matt that yes, as the delegate of diversity and inclusion, I represent everyone. From my own experiences of my unseen disability, also being a part of my identity, but also just I wouldn't perpetrate to say that I represent a Muslim, and I know exactly what they want because I am not Muslim, but I will say that I do definitely want to talk to students of different diverse backgrounds, even that I'm not a part of. I mean, I'm a young law student, I'm only 21. I have friends, of course, who are non-traditional students. One of my very good friends is actually a mother of two right now in our law school class, but I cannot step into her shoes and fully empathize with her experience just by being a delegate of diversity, because I know some experiences of being a minority. I have to talk to these students, and of course, the liaisons are a big part of my plan of learning what's going on with that, as well as the caucuses. I want the liaisons, I want to talk to them and form great relationships with the liaisons, because I feel like if I don't talk to them and understand what powers they have to help out the ABA, then I would be doing a great disservice to people who want to be included in the diversity of the ABA. So just, I agree with Matt that I want to talk to the liaisons, but also just, I feel that the incoming caucuses of getting directly from law students and making sure that I form strong relationships with them so that they are empowered will be greatly important to my position.
All right, thank you. And so this kind of goes back to what Matt's answer was 2 questions back, where he had mentioned the delegate is not just being a diversity inclusion delegate, but a delegate also involved partaking in a lot of different activity, where it be the UBE or law school accreditation. So what is your understanding of the role you would play in the ABA House of Delegates? And could you also include in your answer what kind of responsibilities the diversity delegate would have? And Caitlin, we'll go with you first, and then we'll go to Matt next.
So yes, and I mean up front, I don't have experience in the ABA, having just entered law school, but from reading what the position guidelines were, I understand that I control the grant funding to a degree. I am supposed to form relationships with liaisons, student representatives, student body presidents, and I am supposed to continue to do research and form resolutions that can help include greater diversity inside the ABA in the legal field. I also understand that I am supposed to be somewhat of a figurehead for diversity, be a figurehead for diversity and inclusion. And I also understand that just as a delegate, I will be dealing with different types of people from different types of backgrounds to try to make the ABA diverse with all our different diverse ideas. So that's what I understand the position to be.
All right, thank you, Caitlin. Matt?
Right. So I definitely agree. I think it is definitely your role as delegate of diversity and inclusion to make sure that you are speaking for diverse students. What I will say is my experience with the House of Delegates is that specifically in the House of Delegates, our role is mostly to vote and pay attention. We're a pretty small voting block in terms of the overall House of Delegates. And I think probably the other part that goes on in terms of our actual role as delegate is to make sure that we have sort of our eyes and ears open to other resolutions that are coming forward, to make sure that we're talking with other delegates from other groups, whether it be state bar associations or the other sections, divisions, and forums of the ABA, to make sure that if there's a resolution coming down the pipeline and we want to make sure that the law student division is being represented, if we want to make sure that if we can help advance different diverse efforts, and I think, again, that's something that makes the liaison so helpful. And another thing I think, and I agree with Caitlin here, I think this is particularly where the caucuses come in, because the caucuses are going to influence the law student division assembly, which is going to tell us how to vote. Because your job as a delegate in the House of Delegates is to either make the best decision you can or to follow whatever the law student division assembly or the law student division council has said. So I think it's important to be involved, sort of, if you have one foot in both worlds. I think we serve an odd role in that sense, because we're one of the very few parts of the ABA where we have our own governing body and then we turn around and we're part of another. So I think it's definitely keeping eyes and ears open in the House of Delegates and in the greater ABA, but also getting really engaged at the law student level to make sure that when you go in there and cast your vote, you know exactly what it is that you're casting your vote for, and you know exactly what it is that best serves the interests of the law students.
All right. Thank you to you both on that question. So, as you all both kind of mentioned, delegates have a vote in the ABA House of Delegates, and that's made up of over 500 ABA leaders, in addition to ABA staff members who will be very familiar with diversity. Can you elaborate on your experience with senior Bar Association members or high-level lawyers, officials, or executives, since those are the people you'll be working with? And so, Matt will go first, and then we'll go Caitlin next. So, Matt?
Sure. Well, I'll keep myself mostly tailored to the ABA here. I will say the Philly Bar Association recently awarded me their LGBT Law Student Leader of the Year award because I've done work with them and because of my work with the ABA, particularly Tom Prohl, who is the outgoing New Jersey Bar Association president, and an individual that I worked with on Resolution 109, which is the Model Rules of Professional Conduct, Model Rule 8.4. And I think most of my experience with the ABA in terms of the higher echelons of the ABA comes from working on that resolution. I worked with individuals that have been in the section on civil rights and social justice for 25, 30 years. I worked with Bar Association presidents. I worked with individuals on the Rule of Law Initiative, on the Government Affairs Office. So I did a lot of work on Resolution 109 was doing with upper-level members of the ABA, and I think the best thing to do with upper levels of the ABA is just listen to what they have to say, because you're right, the staff members are incredibly educated, and it does take, I have not spent a lot of time in the House of Delegates in terms of a voting member. I've never been a voting member, and I've only ever seen the actual process once or twice, but I can imagine it would be overwhelming. So I think it's going to be very helpful to have some of those older connections, those connections with lawyers who are more experienced. The other thing I would say is I do sit as a co-chair right now on one of the committees for the section on civil rights and social justice, and I think in part I was able to get in that position as a law student because I've worked with individuals in civil rights and social justice and in that section for a while.
All right, thank you, Matt. Caitlin?
Actually, okay, it's unmuted now. I actually reached out to Andrew Ronan, who previously held the position, and just wanted to hear some of his advice before I even ran for this position, and he had good things to say. And recently, actually, I've come into contact with, and we're forming a relationship, Amy Continent, who is the Young Lawyers Division liaison right now, and I'm actually planning to talk to her on Monday more about just like what she does, how she feels is the best way to form good relationships with older delegates and older people in the ABA, because beyond whether I win this position or not, I see myself as being in the ABA for life, and I really want that to be something that I do, reach out to older ABA members and form relationships with them. So in terms of the ABA, that's my experience. Just in terms of other older lawyers, I've just been networking a lot with lots of different lawyers, so lots of different lawyers in the state of Virginia. I recently went to Virginia Lawyers of the Government Association. I went to their continuing learning education seminar and talked to a lot of those lawyers. I talked to judges and lawyers across firms across the state just to form relationships with them, because I agree with Matt. When I tend to be around older people or people who are feel that are wiser than me in any topic, I will usually stand to the side and just listen to them. I'm a great listener in that way, and actually less of a talker in that I want to hear what you have to say because I genuinely want to learn so I can both help me and help other people.
All right, thank you. So that kind of goes, Matt had kind of mentioned that this takes a lot of listening. Kayla, you mentioned that too, that you really have to be able to listen to the older member. And that kind of takes a lot of time because you need to know what they're saying. So what is your understanding of the time commitment involved with this position? And going with that, what are your other priorities and commitments for the coming year? And what priority will be given to your ABA position should you be elected? So I believe, Caitlin, you're first, and then we'll go to Matt.
Mm-hmm. So, well, first of all, this would be my biggest commitment, of course, I have that I would have for the school year because, of course, it's a national position. It's a position that furthers my lifetime goal of helping as many people as I can. So this, of course, would take precedent over all my other different things that I'm involved in. But kind of what I'm involved in this coming school year is, like I said, I'm the vice president of BOLSA. I am also the moot court coordinator, so I will be coaching our moot court team this year. And then I am the project manager of our school's volunteer community service group, the Pro Bono Board, and my charity group. But I've already been talking to, and I'm going to talk more to Amy Cotton about just time management, how she's able to manage her time and having a full legal career that's very business and very successful, and then also managing to have an ABA position to be successful in that position. So I see this as being a precedent position. I'm not sure how many hours it would take, but definitely just if I have to set something else to the side to fulfill this position, I definitely would.
All right, thank you, Caitlin. Matt?
Absolutely. Well, I've done service on the Lowell Student Division of Leadership before, and I'm aware it always ends up being even more of a time commitment than you expected it to be, as you probably well know. Yeah. So I would say I'm not going to put an hour amount on it. It definitely is going to vary, particularly as we're gearing up for annual and mid-year. What I would say, though, is that one of the reasons I don't hold a leadership position with Outlaw or do something along those lines is because I've always really enjoyed working with the ABA specifically. And I think especially when we got Resolution 109 passed, just this amazing sense of we did something on this national scale. And there's something really appealing about doing work that you know is going to sort of immediately affect the lives of a lot of people. There's a lot of responsibility that attaches with it, but it's also an exhilarating feeling knowing that your work really matters. So I would say I've cleared a lot of space. My appointment for this committee chairship in civil rights and section of civil rights and social justice is for the upcoming year. So I will be doing that, and I'll also continue to work with the Student Shield project. But aside from that, the ABA is where I want to be, and it's where I want to work.
Great, thank you to you both. So we're gonna kind of start winding down. So I'm gonna have two kind of questions that are more fun, that just people get to know who you are. So the first question I'm going to ask is, what is a favorite life motto that you have and you like to share to someone? I'll start with Matt on this, and then we'll go Caitlin.
Can you repeat that? I didn't hear the end of it.
Sorry about that. I think I muted really too early. What is a favorite life motto that you have and that you like to tell someone about?
Oh, wow. All right. Yikes. Favorite life motto. Okay, I can do this. So there's a motto that I heard. I went to a small school and I took Latin for a year when I was in college. And one of the mottos that we heard in the course of that was from possibility to actuality. And I really like that motto because it's really about being imaginative, about taking creativity, about taking something that's possible and finding a way to make it practical. And I'm all about creativity, I'm all about being imaginative, but I don't think that means anything unless you can translate it into something that makes a difference, that actually is tangible, that actually is practical. So that would be my motto there. It's not very fun, but
no, it's great. Thank you, Matt. How about you, Caitlin?
Yeah, so mine's actually not very original, I guess, because it was given to me. But well, I was a Duke Tip student actually for the constitutional law seminar that they hosted there. my camp counselor, she gave each of us in her group a quote, and my quote was from Mariel Strode, which was, "Do not follow where the path may lead. Go instead your own way and leave a trail." And I mean, it's not mine, but I really like that quote because it's both saying that, like, and it's influenced my life so much, and that I need to go my own way and be able to think independently and not just follow the crowd, but at the same time, if I am not going to follow the crowd, I also want to be able to leave a trail that anybody else who also wants to break out and be independent can follow that trail. So just kind of define my life a little bit. I'm here at 21 in law school. That's happened through some very unconventional ways. And so, I mean, it's been difficult sometimes, but just I see myself as that. And already a lot of people are like, but that's something that I might want to do, and just like going to law school, and just I see that you can do it, so I also want to break out in unconventional ways and try what I can do. So that's just a motto that I tend to live by.
All right, those are two great life mottos. So I learned something from those two. So thank you for that. And the second question I was going to ask is, if you were a city, which city would you choose to be and why? So Caitlin, we'll go first with you, and then we'll go to Matt.
So I actually just came from San Francisco on, like, I got finished with my first part of the summer internship, and then I went on an Amtrak train and went all the way to California with my cousin, which was great, and we went to San Francisco. And so that was just an amazingly diverse city. I mean, every city has its problems, but it was just amazingly diverse. It was an amazing mixture of the old and the new. And just in my life, I tried to live, like, with your traditions, but then also like new and innovation. And so I just think that city really describes me. It may also help that I was born in California, but just, I would say San Francisco.
All right, I like that. I'm in San Francisco right now, but Matt, go ahead.
All right, well, I'm going to represent Philadelphia Pride. That's where I go to law school. I grew up right across the river. I'm just going to have to say Philadelphia. It's a wonderful city. It's one of those cities that just sort of endured. And I know we're not old by world city standards, but to have the history there, to have Independence Hall and all of sort of our colonial history there, and then also just sort of this burst of new growth. It's a great place to live. So I'm just going to represent Philly Pride. That's what I'm going to do.
I like that. I like you standing with Philly. So with that, we're going to do closing statements for both of you, and you'll both get 2 minutes on that, and then we'll open up the floor to anyone who is on. So, Matt, please go and give your closing statement.
Right. I'm sure anyone who is still on this call is ready to be done, so I will be very brief here. I would very much like to be your delegate of diversity and inclusion. I think I bring a lot of experience and a lot of really strong, tangible ideas to the table. And that's all I have to say. That's my closing statement.
All right. Thank you, Matt. Caitlin?
Yeah, I'll be a little bit longer, sorry, but not too long. I just want to say that, yes, I really want this position. As I mentioned previously, it's my life goal to help as many people as I can, and especially, but not specifically, people who come from a disadvantaged background. And so to hold this position would mean the world to me, absolutely. But it's not just for the people that I know, like I mentioned the anecdotes that I have, but it's also for the people that I'm not thinking of right now. I really am a person that I want to help everybody if I can. I will go to great lengths to do that, but I will not do that at a way that is hurtful to anybody if I can as well. And so just, if I am elected to this position, I know that I don't have much experience. I know that I am very young, and some people may be worried about that, but I am also a quick study. I am willing and ready to hit with my feet on the ground running and getting going with this thing. And also just, again, from my professional background, from my background as a person, and from the things that I hope to learn as I continue to live my life, I really think that I would be good for this position as the delegate of diversity and inclusion. So I thank everybody for their time and consideration. And I look forward to seeing as many people as I can in New York and just hanging out, really, getting to meet people.
All right, thank you. I see there's attendees beyond us, so if anyone wants to speak, please ask a question. I don't know if it can be open. Austin, can we open it to anyone? I mean, I guess we cannot. So with that, yeah.
We can use. There's a question function if someone has any questions.
Okay.
But we are running up on the time, so.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, if I don't see any questions, I'm going to thank both of you for your time, for the great answers that you've given. I really appreciate hearing all of this. I look forward to having the students vote one of you in and working with you in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good night.
You too.